One of the biggest decisions for the Toronto Maple Leafs coming into this offseason is what they're going to do with John Tavares, as he only has 1 year left on his deal, and some rumors are starting to circulate that the Leafs could be looking to trade the captain, and fans are not opposed to that. So we're going to break all that down in this episode of Leafs Digest. Before we do, if you're a part of the 80% who are not subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and support has been great, and we probably will be going live for a live stream tonight, so if you're watching the video right now, stay tuned. We'll be scheduling that stream at some point throughout the day, so hopefully you can all tune in, and we'll see you all there. But Darius, Leafs fans are fired up a little bit about this. Some Leafs fans want Tavares gone. Some want him to stay. Some want his captain removed. There's a lot to discuss here, and it seems like some rumors are circulating that maybe they could be looking to trade John Tavares. When you're looking at what John Tavares said himself, he said, "I love playing here. Of course, after another early exit, another bid for gold, another delicate contract here on Captain John Tavares, an uncertain future with the Toronto Maple Leafs." And this is a great article. Basically goes to say that while Tavares maintains he hasn't given much thought into signing an extension, he famously chose the Leafs in free agency way back, something he'll become eligible for on Canada Day. The player himself has managed the spotlight well and has zero inclination of wanting out in Toronto. And of course, he has his whole family here. They signed him way back from the Islanders back in 2018. Darius, what are your thoughts on this whole situation? I think they're hopefully going to keep him because at the worst case, you re-sign him, hopefully, or he leaves is the worst case, but at the best case, you re-sign him for a hometown discount of maybe 5.5 AAV.
Yeah, there's a couple things with Tavares right now. Fans, in terms of fans, a lot want him just gone. A lot want him to be stripped of the captaincy and given to somebody else, right? That's up for debate as well. And some people want him to stay. And clearly, I'm a little bit biased. I like John Tavares over here, so that's a little biased by me. But I think the most likely outcome, I think, based on everything he said, and that was a great article too, and it's a great read by Luke Fox on Sportsnet, is I think the most likely thing is Tavares rides out the last year of his contract. He does sign an extension, whether that's for 4 years, that takes him to 38 years old or maybe 39 years old, and he signs at a much less AAV to give the Leafs obviously a break, and that he moves into a new role as a third line center or something like that, because he's still a very useful player, and he would be elsewhere. It's just the cap hit and the recency bias that everyone is leaning towards. I still think he's a great player. If he was to play on the Leafs for 4 or 5 million, nobody would be complaining because he would have a different role on the third line, like I said, and it wouldn't be as bad because the Leafs would be able to go out and get a second line center and spend all of that money elsewhere. So It's a lot of the recency bias that a lot of people want him gone. In terms of the captaincy thing, which we can get to into as well, I think he's a pretty good captain. That's been called into question, right? He's just a more quiet captain. He leads by example. He takes rookies into his house, lets them live with him, right? So he's that type of captain. He doesn't really lead with emotion like a Brad Marchand or some other guys in the league, which I think the Leafs and Leaf fans really want, because we've had captains like that in the past. Like, people didn't like Matt Sundin for the same reason, right? So I do think he is still a good captain. However, I do think it's Austin Matthews' team now. So for that, I would think that they move on from John Tavares as captain, but most likely outcome, I think he stays as a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Yeah, that's kind of what the article goes to say. And we obviously know that he does get some endorsements from outside deals, which helps with the money. And I think he just wants to raise his family in Toronto, which is something he kind of alluded to before he even came here way back in 2018. But he said, "I love playing here. It's a remarkable place to play. When I committed here 6 years ago, obviously I saw a tremendous amount of talent and an amazing hockey market and an organization that's fully committed to winning and doing whatever it can, and I still feel that way." Like, it seems like there's zero inclination of him requesting a trade or anything like that. But if the Toronto Maple Leafs and the new management, Brad Treliving, he obviously wasn't the one who signed John Tavares. It was Kyle Dubas. They don't really necessarily have any emotional attachment to the signing. They could look to potentially, if they really want to shake things up, move him depending on what Mitch Marner's thing or his no-move clause situation ends up being. But you're not going to get too much for an expiring John Tavares at this point in his career, especially with that cap hit. You probably won't get anything at all. It'll be very hard to move him. So at that point, you're better off waiting. And then the worst case is he walks for nothing, which is fine. The Leafs planned to win a cup by now, but obviously they didn't, so the contract looks worse. But I think, you just play it out, and the worst that happens is that they don't re-sign him, and at best and most likely you get an asset at $5.5 million that if you end up wanting to trade him in the future, that's still a valuable third line center at that cap hit anyways.
Yeah, there's zero indication that he wants to leave Toronto. So for the next year at least, I would almost put it out of question that he is not going to be traded, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. They'll probably write out the rest of his contract, because if you want to trade that contract in today's NHL with the way the salary cap is too, you're probably having to throw in a sweetener, and that's not the point of this trade if it were to go down. right? And like you said too, I think Tavares wants to raise his family. A lot of these quotes, if you read into it, it sounds like he wants to, raise his family in Toronto and build his family in Toronto, stay in Toronto, retire in Toronto as a Leaf. And obviously, it's not going to be at the same cap hit. Like, it's just not going to be on his next contract. There's no way. He's declining. He's getting older. But, he's coming into next season at 33, 34 years old, right? So he's going to have to take less. If he still wants more like that, the Leafs can just let him walk, which would be not great either because you lose an asset in that way. But I do think he wants to stay in Toronto, and he probably will take a discount because he is getting older. It's just the fact of the matter. So I don't think we're going to see him move in the next year. That's for sure. And I think he's going to take on a new role with the team. The team is going to change a little bit over the course of the next 2 seasons, and I think that's exciting as well. And it's still a good thing. He's still a very quality player. He just had, down points in last season and didn't finish a point a game player or anything like that. But he's usually a point a game player, and at his age, that's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for that 13 or so game pointless streak, he probably would have finished at around 80 points, which we'd probably be having an entirely different conversation now. And you kind of just mentioned that Tavares would end up being would not be a salary dump in a hypothetical trade. The Leafs wouldn't need to attach a sweetener like they did way back for Patrick Marleau. But what is the real point in trading Tavares at this point? That's why I agree with you. Would Tavares, who holds the hammer here, be willing to waive his power and accept a trade, realizing the Leafs won't be in any rush to re-sign him? That's possible, but again, all signs seem to point towards him to stay with the Leafs. Maybe not after this year, but most likely. And you kind of mentioned it, that he's not the emotional leader that fans are craving, but he's still an elite faceoff man, very durable, still plays. And again, if it wasn't for that pointless streak last year, we could be having an entirely different conversation about his difference between 65 points, 60 points, and then the 80 points that he could have easily had if he just had put together a couple of good games during that stretch, and which is why he's kind of getting not underrated at this point, maybe undervalued, I would say, by Leafs fans regarding his usefulness to a team. Especially, obviously, the playoffs, he wasn't the best, but he still was a decent player there. So the Leafs do need to add a middle six center. That's kind of what the article clues up saying. But shed Tavares, and they'll need two, and that's the whole point here. You're kind of subtracting just someone that you need. You need depth centers. Obviously, the cap hit is brutal, but that won't be an issue after this year anyways, and they're not in a position where they need to fully shed salary. They're trying to win.
Yeah, they're still trying to win, but next year is going to be an awkward year just because of the salary structure. I would look for 2026 to be a year where you go, okay, the Leafs have changed a little bit and the structure of the team is going to change. And I think Tavares is probably still going to be on it. I just don't think he wants to leave. That is the vibe I'm getting. But like you said, he's still very useful. He plays almost every game, every season. He's a great face-off guy, which he's won key draws in key situations for them in the playoffs. There is some recency bias, but he does come up big in certain situations. He won a series for them in overtime last year. He set up a big goal in game 5 of this year, right? He still does come up big in certain moments. So he's just going to take on a lesser role as time goes on here. The Leafs still need to fill out the roster, and his contract is making it difficult. That is a fact, but we knew it was going to get to this point anyway. So, once they move on from this contract, and I'm assuming he signs an extension, which I thought was pretty weird that he mentioned they haven't talked about or even looked into it, because he's eligible for one as soon as this July 1st. So I wonder if that becomes a story this summer too, if they don't come to an extension or terms going into next season. I wonder what that looks like.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, something to keep an eye on. Obviously, we're still waiting for the head coach job. We're still waiting for a lot of different things, but this is definitely something that's interesting. Let us know in the comments, do you want to re-sign John Tavares? Do you think trading him is the best idea? Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe button. We'll see you soon.